for many of us. As a psychologist, for me, it was a professional call to start handling some of those mental health consequences that the pandemic had on many of us. So AMKA Counselling is a product of that, really. It was started as a voluntary community of psychologists providing mental health support. And then as the need was growing, and we started receiving interest from different organizations, from the private sector, from charities, from universities. That's how eventually, only a couple of months ago, I registered as a company. But it's been an exciting journey as a psychologist and as someone who very much cares about mental health. Within the broad topic of mental health, what we are covering is mental health and well-being at the workplace. So we are looking at questions such as stress management, time management, dealing with mood swings, remote work, hybrid models, so questions that are quite timely these days with the pandemic and then restrictions going on and off. Before we get into the main topic of today, which will be about mindfulness and motivation, I just wanted to mention a couple of thoughts with you in terms of what this workshop could look like. And first and foremost, I wanted to say that I'll try to walk you through some concepts around motivation and mindfulness with the help of activities. For these activities, what I would like us to do is that this becomes a confidential group. And so if you feel comfortable later on for these activities, please turn your camera on and feel free to share your thoughts, experiences, and your answers to the questions that I'll be asking you. And so for this purpose, if we could all keep to a confidentiality within the group, that would be great. So that would mean we're not discussing any personal experiences shared in this group outside of this group. I hope that will help us share some more experiences. Now, for this reason, we will not be recording the part from the activities onwards. And so if you feel comfortable, bring in your experiences. If you don't, that's also fine. I have a lot of experience through work that I've done in various organizations, so I can always come in with some more examples. So no pressure at all. In terms of the materials, on the chat, I have already sent to you, hopefully everyone can see it, a PDF document, which is just a brief outline of the introductory bits that I'll be telling you. And then we'll have one of these activities that we'll be doing previously through Eventbrite. Those who registered should have received what I call a motivation tracker or a work tracker. And those who for some reason might not have received it, we'll send it on the chat as we get closer to the time. As Karin kindly said, please don't share this outside of the group, outside of participants, as I'll be using it for that other workshops as well. And just a final point on internet connection. I'm not expecting to have any internet issues, but if something happens, I have my phone here as well, and I'll just try to log on again through the phone. So if I disappear, just give me a few moments, I'll log back in, but hopefully it's not going to happen. Likewise, if internet drops for you, feel free to rejoin. We'll be here. I'll try to give a brief summary of where we are at that moment. And so with that, let me just briefly tell you what the agenda will look like. So in a moment, we'll get into an introductory bit about motivation and mindfulness and the relation to one another. We'll have then at least, hopefully, 3 activities. It will depend a bit on the time, how we go. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A and wrapping up by best practices. So then to get us started, I would like all of you to think for a moment about motivation. What comes to mind about motivation? I'll give you about 30 seconds, and I would like you to identify one example, one thing that you feel is going well for you in terms of motivation right here, right now. And then another thing where you feel, oh, this is a challenge for me in terms of motivation. Okay, so one thing that is going well, one thing that is a challenge. A few seconds to think. Okay. Is there someone who is happy to share something that is going well in terms of motivation? Go ahead, please. Narinder, please.
Is that me? Yeah. They're kind of flip sides of the same coin. So the thing that I feel is going well is that if I know that I've got a limited discrete task to do, I'll be very happily get up and go and do it. But when I've got a task that is huge, I feel like overwhelmed by it. I don't know where to start, or I kind of know what needs to be done, but I just can't seem to find the get up and go to do it.
Thank you very much. Someone else who would jump in with a quick thought on what is going well. Go ahead, Isabel. Sue, please.
One thing that I am motivated, during lockdown, or the past year, we've been out walking a lot, and it's become a habit. And it's the only thing I find that I really, really want to do every day is get out for a walk. So I suppose that's a positive, that something that has been kind of forced on me that I've really discovered is really good for my mental health. So I feel really, I feel motivated to do that kind of most days.
Thank you very much. So what I hear from you is the motivation to go out for these walks. It's a nice experience. It's something that is good for your mental health on an everyday basis. And then Narinder saying that when there's a specific task, a limited time, then you feel motivated to go for it. So thank you both. Is there someone who's happy to share something that is a bit of a challenge in terms of motivation? I'm even happy to break the ice here. For me, sometimes a challenge is meeting deadlines. It relates to Narinder's point, meeting deadlines that are far away, and I can't really see that the reward would be coming anytime soon. So that's a challenge for me. Anyone else who would be okay with sharing an example? If not, then that's absolutely fine. We'll get there, and you will see from the introductory bit as to how we get to challenges and facilitators of motivation. So now I'm going to tell you a bit about the psychology of motivation and how that relates to mindfulness. So if you want to follow it from the PDF document, feel free to open it up, but I'll just keep it without without sharing the screen, so that I can explain it a bit more with my gestures, with my own words. And so motivation, when we speak about motivation, and nowadays, when it comes to productivity, when it comes to the workplace, motivation would very much be associated with this everyday, me getting something done today, this week, next week. So it would be, that's what we have recently associated it with. However, from a psychology perspective, literature has been, and research has been looking at it for a long while. And so the first bunch of theories that looked at motivation as a human behavior came from a perspective that motivation equaled to a drive, something that drives our behavior. And moreover, it looked at it from an incentive viewpoint. So there's an incentive for me to do something, and I would like to reduce that drive that is there so that I can come back to me feeling very peaceful. Since then, the theory that has taken over is called the self-determination theory, which says that the extent to which I have my purpose consciously in mind, the extent to which I feel autonomous in my decision-making, my motivation levels will change. And so on the PDF document, you can see that I listed a couple of kind of technical terms about motivation. So this theory says that we might be intrinsically motivated. So that means it's something that comes from our values, it comes from our baseline principles as to what we are motivated to do. It can be an identified motivation, which would mean that we agree with someone. We agree that someone's value, it makes sense to work for it. So therefore, again, we feel motivated to work on that task, to work on that principle. And then in the same time, we have motivations that might be introjected. It might be someone else controlling me and saying, well, this is what you have to do. And this would be, for example, in university, when you really have to submit an assignment, or at the workplace when you really have to meet that deadline. And so it's very close to the external motivation, which is even more of an external perspective, such as monetary rewards to something that you would have to do. And then the last one would be amotivation, when we are not motivated to do anything. And then, so a last area that is relevant here is flow and positive psychology, that is looking at how we can become in different areas of our life intrinsically motivated, and how we can, connecting it to mindfulness, how can we be more and more present in these different areas of life and feel intrinsically motivated. So in everyday life, when we translate it to the day-to-day living, when is it that we would have to feel motivated? How can this even become a question? So in terms of a productivity and work perspective, especially during the pandemic, there has been so much thinking about what is it that makes us productive? What is it that makes us effective, efficient in our work, in our studies, and so on. However, if we look at it more from a personality perspective, the question is, how can we build a career? How can we build a personal life that is aligned with our values? We are motivated to go for those values. We are motivated to go for goals that we assign to ourselves. And so going from motivation a little bit to the question of mindfulness, how are these two things connected? What's very interesting is, if you look at literature, the psychologists have found that, generally speaking, there's a positive association between being mindful, practicing mindfulness, and being intrinsically motivated. So the more you work on one area, the more you will be developing the other as well. Being mindful, keeping to the present, living the present will help you with the goals that you have intrinsically for yourself outlined. And then likewise, there is a negative association of mindfulness, of motivation and controlled forms. So the more mindful you are, the more you practice mindfulness, the more difficult it can become to deliver tasks that are completely externally motivated. What I'm going to focus on in the later parts of the workshop, especially with the activities, is this first aspect, so the positive association. How can we build goals? How can we set out principles and values for ourselves as such that we can remain mindful in an everyday practice and feel motivated? So how can we be aligned in all these questions? With that in mind, that the more mindful we are, the more we practice mindfulness, the easier it will become for us to find intrinsic motivation, and the harder it will be to feel externally motivated and to find external rewards actually rewarding. So I guess what I'm speaking about here is really about having a purpose-driven personal life, a purpose-driven career in different areas of life, values and principles that are aligned with who we are and the personality that we've been working on for all these years. Right. And with that, on the end of the PDF document that I shared, you will just have a few articles that, if you're interested in reading more about the psychology perspectives of all of these are 3 interesting articles that give a really good overview of these topics that I briefly touched on. Any questions at this point?